All right. Thanks very much, and welcome to everyone to the Education Workforce Webinar 3. This is the third of a series of 3, and today's focus will be the retention of school leaders. And I'm really pleased that you're able to join us today, and hope that this will generate some thoughts and discussions in school authorities in relation to research that I'll be sharing, as well as the stories of practice that Corinne will be sharing shortly. So for today, the agenda is simply, I'll be just doing some introductions, a land acknowledgement, as well as the some selected research findings from the research report that I was involved in with Alberta Education Support last year. The presentation, of course, from Corinne, and then a Q&A. There will be some breakout rooms and discussions going forward. So the session is being recorded, just so that you are aware. The breakout rooms, breakout sessions will not be recorded, but when we come back in and have a fuller discussion, that will be recorded, picked up again. We believe that the discussion and the opportunity to hear what other school authorities are doing is a valuable thing, and we would like that to be part of the recorded video. I do invite all of you to please add your name to the chat, which is found at the bottom of your Zoom screen, likely at the bottom. First name, last name. This allows us to track attendance for the webinars, and it also serves some continuing education program credit verification as well. So if you could please do that, that would be terrific. And that way we are able to, like I said, track attendance and for CEP purposes. I will like to just at this point in time, introduce Corinne Thorsteinson is the Associate Superintendent of People Services and People Services in Red Deer Public Schools. And she's has indicated she's feels very fortunate to be working in human resource leadership, and she's been doing that for over 10 years, where she has had the opportunities to facilitate mentorship, empower others to navigate tricky personnel issues, and oversee the implementation of some vital HR processes and employment conditions. Now, she has indicated that she's approaching retirement as of December 2025 after 30 years in the role of teacher, assistant principal, principal, and division office leader in Lacombe, Clive, Ponoka, and now most recently in Red Deer. Corinne's education background as a BA, BEd, and MEd were all from the University of Lethbridge, and Corinne has mentioned that she has great joy and energy from helping others build their capacity and leadership. So we're really pleased that you are joining us today, Corinne, and we look forward to these stories. I'd also like to acknowledge that we have representatives from Alberta Education present who are listening in on the conversation and the presentation. I'd like to acknowledge Satinder Dhillon, who is the Executive Director and Registrar for Teaching and Leadership Excellence Department in Alberta Education. Welcome, Satinder. I'd also like to welcome Amanda Jackman, who's director director, pardon me, with the certification branch of Teaching and Leadership Services, as well as Kendall Tupker and Julieta de los Santos, who I've worked with in the past, and Julieta was instrumental in the development and analysis and write-up of the research report. So I'm really pleased that all of these representatives from Alberta Education are present. Oh, as well as Haoye, I'm sorry, Jin, who is present as well and participating. So thank you very much for attending. Sorry, I'm jumping to my keyboard to advance the slides. CAS, as we know, the College of Alberta School Superintendents is a provincial organization and encompasses school authorities in Alberta and in Northwest Territories. And as such, our collective educational work is carried out on traditional territories, gathering grounds, meeting places, and traveling routes of the Treaty 6, Treaty 7, and Treaty 8 nations. We acknowledge the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who have walked and lived in all of these lands. And we acknowledge that our past, present, and future is intertwined, and together we will shape this land and what is to come. We also acknowledge, this is also an acknowledgement that CAS has a commitment to reconciliation in our collective engagement with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. We also want to acknowledge that we have focused on the professional practice standards for the Superintendent Leadership Quality Standard, as well as the Leadership Quality Standard, that the competencies of modeling commitment to professional learning for both the SLQS and LQS is present, as well as school authority operations and resources for SLQS, and managing school operations and resources for the LQS, so that school-based as well as system-based competencies are being addressed, as well as for the LQS, understanding and responding to the larger societal context, which is a factor for us to consider in school-based leadership. So today, I want to highlight some selected findings. And of course, the purpose of the study was to determine and anticipate current and future K-12 teacher and school-based educational leaders' workforce needs throughout Alberta. So it was Alberta focused. And our core questions were, what are the current and future K-12 teacher workforce needs and trends in Alberta? And what are the recruitment and retention strategies used by school authorities to address teaching and leadership workforce needs? And how effective are these strategies according to system leaders? That was an important question for us to be addressing as well. We used a survey we invited all charter, francophone, public, and separate school authorities in Alberta to participate. And the data we collected, we did collect a little bit, some quantitative data, which we provide as descriptive statistics, and some qualitative data as well, which where we took the text-based responses and they were themed and aggregated into grand themes. And you'll see some of that information here, but I do invite everyone to go to the full report or the executive summary of that report to get more details. I will only be selecting certain parts of this, of course, but relevant for today. But what I did want to share, and before I go into some of these key findings, there are some limitations that I do want to highlight. The analysis was done based on the response of survey participants, and the survey participants were system education leaders who were responsible for teacher and school leader staffing and/or professional development. The survey did not include teachers specifically or school leader responses directly. So we're getting the perspective of school leaders who are responsible for these actions across Alberta. We, as I said, we invited all CAS-based school authorities, of which there were 86, 54 school authorities responded. The survey was quite lengthy and intense, so I do appreciate very much the fact that everyone took that survey and gave us, I think, some really valuable information. This represents 63% of the school authorities that were participated in this survey. And the school authorities represented then as well 72% of the entire student population of Alberta. So these overall responses were just tremendous and gave us a lot of confidence, I think, in the responses. Today, we're focusing on school leaders. And what I did want to highlight was, just to give a bit of context, was the 5-year trend for school leaders leaving, and it's been fairly stable over the last 5 years. And like teachers, it was more common for 10% or less of school leaders to leave on an annual basis. Now, of course, there were individual school authorities that were outside of this, but what we saw was that there would be occasionally high amounts of leaving in 1 year and much more reduced over the next couple of years. However, I think the key takeaway here is that for the most part, about 10% of school leaders are leaving on an annual basis. When we think about a retention of school leaders, this runs parallel to our findings with teachers as well. We found that in terms of retention strategies, PD supports, division culture, benefits, and well-being were the themes that emerged. And in terms of actions, PD supports really includes professional learning activities, but it also includes classroom supports like educational assistance or teacher coaches or inclusive education consultants. That's that type of thing. So PD supports is an overarching aggregated grand theme, and I wanted to pull that information out for us to think about. In all of this, the top 2 retention actions of PD supports and division culture account for most survey responses. And that certainly indicates that school authorities emphasize supports for professional learning, professional development, and the culture of the division in their efforts to retain school staff. What we found was in terms of least effective retention strategies, some of the patterns we did invite participants to indicate what they felt was least effective. And there were, in terms of responses, many school divisions said they did not engage in retention action. Some indicated that PD supports, benefits, and division culture were not effective retention strategies. This was an interesting kind of finding for us, given what we saw as most effective retention strategies. And many school authorities responded that they didn't engage in any kind of retention action, and some felt that the PD supports that they provided were not effective in retaining teachers or teachers and school leaders, because they were no different than other school authorities, and therefore did not provide a kind of competitive advantage. I think today's session, you're going to hear some reframing of that kind of challenge, and it doesn't take it away. It just means that we can think about it in a different way, and I'm looking forward to what Corinne has to offer. The rationale for retention actions, meaning why did school authorities take the actions that they took? And one of the biggest takeaways was teacher success, that for school leaders, the focus on teacher success was important, as well as increasing staff for the school and the school division. And school authorities favored teacher success and increasing staff numbers as their top rationale for top rational actions for teacher and school leaders. There was the sense of investment in teacher success as being pretty critical for school authorities. In terms of general considerations of the research findings, and this is something, this is really highly synthesized. I do invite you to take a look at the report. But there were some school authorities that felt that their locations were perhaps their locations had an impact on their recruitment and retention of teachers and school leaders. And some of the rural areas expressed concern that they were not able to get or retain the teachers and school leaders that they had hoped for. However, there were other school authorities that clearly indicated that they, once the teachers were there or school leaders, that they were happy to stay there, and that there was a sense of belonging that was nurtured in the school and at the division level. School authority culture was important, and I think that another, area in terms of recruitment, but also in terms of retention, was the sense that that people felt like they could connect and be part of a greater school culture, and that sense of school culture was really important. The effectiveness of specific recruitment and retention strategies, they were variable across. I mean, there were core themes that were really clear that I have already indicated in terms of actions that seemed to be most effective. They were variable, but there were some discrepancies between what was considered most effective and least effective for recruitment and retention that we're talking about today. And it is very contextual and based on the immediate needs of the authority. Now, the one thing I did want to mention as well was that when we have an issue around the recruitment and retention of teachers and or school leaders, there is an impact on students, because if we're not able to find the right people with the educational background or the skills or knowledge, that has an impact on the programming that is made available to students. So there is, I think, an urgency that school authorities have in terms of finding the right people to fill these positions, whether it's at the classroom level and also at the school level. These considerations can be found in the summary, the executive summary that I mentioned, and the link is also provided for you here. At this time, I'm going to stop this part of our findings. There's so much more to share, but I would like this opportunity to invite Corinne to talk a little bit about what Red Deer Public Schools does and how they look at retention of school leaders and the kinds of things that they do. So over to you, Corinne. Thank you.
Thank you, Edgar. Hi to everybody. It's good to see you. And I just want to start by thanking Edgar for including me in this series of webinars. It's such interesting work and something that really is close to my heart in terms of, how we invest in our people, whether that's our teachers, our leaders, or a combination of any of those groups. We all know the magic happens in our schools and in our classrooms. And so ensuring that we are getting the right people in place and then investing in them so that they can do the best job that they can means value add for everybody that's involved in our school divisions. So I think that kind of the way I want to frame out the things that I'm going to talk about here this afternoon is really in terms of that notion of investment. I'll, just to kind of touch on a couple of things that Edgar has shared in terms of some of those key findings from the study. Location is certainly a factor that we have the luxury of here in Red Deer. I would say that our geographical location allows us some luxuries in terms of maybe not the same challenges that many of you might have who are in maybe more remote areas of the province. All of our schools in Red Deer Public are located within the city limits of the city of Red Deer. And so, we don't have those great distances between sites, and being in the corridor between Calgary and Edmonton is certainly something that I think is an attractive feature for our division. But we can go deeper than that, and you know, there's some pieces around that investment, because in general, our people tend to come to us in Red Deer Public and they stay. And that's a fabulous thing to have in your organization. And many of our staff members grew up in Red Deer, attended our schools, and now work for us. And so we have people that are committed to staying in our community, and as a result, committed to our division. So I want to just kind of ground a few things in some key pieces from the study itself. And so, you know, some things that really resonated with me in terms of the application to the types of things that we're doing here in Red Deer Public from the study, in particular around that internal capacity building, succession planning, and mentorship in PD, or three big themes that really resonated with me from the study. And then we're all familiar with Vivian Robinson's work, and you know, that idea that next to the classroom teacher, it's our leaders, our school leaders in particular, but our leaders who are the next most important people in the success of students in our school divisions. And so coming at it from thinking about that instructional focus, distributed leadership, and a culture of leadership from Robinson's work, and then, you know, really kind of tying the two of those together is, I think those are really the drivers for some of the opportunities that we've tried to create to invest in our school and division-based leaders here in our division. It was interesting to me, you know, the one part in the study that talked about, you know, sort of on one hand, people saying that PD opportunities and mentorship and things like that were a driver for recruitment and retention. But then on the flip side, also some acknowledging that they weren't drivers because they weren't necessarily anything that was different than what other school divisions were doing. And I think that, you know, sort of just to reframe that for my purposes here today, I would say that none of the things that I'm going to talk about were really established or implemented as a way to recruit people, but more as a way to retain our people and invest in our people. So sort of that attitude of people aren't leaving Red Deer Public because they're doing something different somewhere else, but thinking about it through the lens of people want to stay in Red Deer Public because we're doing these things and we're investing in them as educators. And so that's kind of the real lens that we've looked through as we've put together a program of mentorship. Some of the key circumstances that I think we are addressing in our division, and these are probably quite similar to some of the same contexts that you have where you're at, is that idea of aging out. So I'll share some stats with you shortly. And for those of you that attended our session back in November at the fall conference in Calgary, I shared this with you as well, but just kind of taking a look at, you know, the age of our school-based leaders and the rest of our division leaders, and what does that mean for our contingency planning and succession planning. Our career-long employees, I've talked about that as an investment. Formation of our non-educators as well. And so I realize that the study isn't specific to our non-educational leaders, but there is an element of some of the things that we're trying to do in the division that are also focused on how can we bring our non-education leaders, so our facilities leadership, caretaking leadership, and other groups like that, how can we bring them into that formation and ensure that we're also tooling them with the right skills that they need in order to be successful as leaders, because ultimately that has a ripple effect on the whole division. Shifting in terms of some of our hiring processes away from that entitlement process or entitlement hiring towards process or evidence-based hiring, and enhancements to our evaluation, supervision, mentorship, and support processes for our current and prospective school leaders. So those are kind of the contextual pieces for us. So yeah, this is from back in about November is when we pulled these stats. So just kind of looking at the overall, the average age and the age range of our various leadership groups in the division. And we just sort of used age 48 as, I don't know that there was anything scientific to pulling that number, but it was just sort of an interesting stat to sort of take a look at how many of our leaders in the various groups were over that age, because, you know, knowing that many of our people sort of choose that age of 55 to retire. You know, when we're looking at sort of who's age 48 and older, we kind of can have many years of thinking about what are our needs going to be with our succession planning. And so, you know, there's two ways to look at that. There's the succession planning part of it, but there's also, you know, looking at only 31% of our vice principals are over the age of 48. Those people are going to be the next leaders in those other categories, right? They are likely going to move through the system, and they're going to become our next principals. And some of those will also become our senior admin. And so I think it just puts the spotlight on the importance of that investment in our people, because we know they're going to stay with us for the most part. So how do we start now ensuring that they have what they need to be our next systems leaders, and making those decisions on a broader scale? Our facilities and caretaker and head caretakers as well. Like, you can see that the demographic there is you know, significantly over that age 48. And so thinking about what that looks like for us as well is important to us. We recently, as many of you who are in the HR world, have, you know, kind of gotten through probably the bulk of your leadership hiring here for next year. So we just, in our most recent recruitments in Red Deer Public, when we hired for vice principals, we had 33 applicants. 76% of those were internal applicants. Our principal applicants, we had 22. 68% of them were internal, and we also hired for an associate superintendent position, 20 applications, 25% of those internal. So I think those are good, just kind of good markers for us to sort of be using that, I think, also as an evidence piece for, is the work that we're doing, is it having an impact? Is it creating conditions where people feel like they are ready to take the next step and invest in that next position in our division? And hopefully that comes with some confidence that they will be supported and have you know, ongoing pieces in place to help them be successful in those roles. This was another interesting statistic. So just kind of back to that idea of succession planning and thinking about, you know, our people coming and staying with us and the need to have that investment in our people. So interestingly enough, I pulled the average years of service for our people before becoming a vice principal. And so that was roughly about 14 years on average before people were becoming vice principals. And I can see that is probably going to start to shift and change over the coming years, just knowing, you know, sort of where some of our hiring practices have gone. Average years of service before becoming a principal, about 17 years in our division, and average years of being a vice principal before becoming a principal, 7.8 years. So, you know, there's some really critical points there in that average of 14.2 years before people are stepping into a formal leadership role. What are the things that we can do to invest in them, create excellent teacher leaders in our division, and encourage people to take that next step? And within that period of time of being a vice principal to a principal, 7.8 years, how do we invest and support and grow these people so that they can run our schools? So those are some interesting stats for us that kind of, again, provide some context for some of the things that we're trying to do. So the first thing that I want to share, and some of you might remember some of these details from our session back in November, but one of the things that we started 3 years ago here in the division is what we call aspiring leaders, which is maybe a little different than what a lot of school divisions call aspiring leaders. Our aspiring leaders is really aimed at building capacity in all of our employee groups. And so these are sessions that we have roughly, I think this year we had 6 sessions over the course of the school year. And those take place after hours. So they start at 4:15 in the afternoon and they run until 5:30. and anyone's welcome to register and attend. So we have like a real cross section of our employee groups. We have quite a lot of our current administration who attend those sessions. We have facilities and caretaking leadership who attend the sessions. We have obviously lots of teachers. We also have some of our support positions, some of our social workers attending, school counselors, executive and administrative assistants. So our topics are fairly broad, and they're generally kind of grounded in maybe a leadership philosophy or a book about leadership. And we have some content, often draw on our current leadership in the school division to serve on panels, to sort of share their stories, and then an opportunity for facilitated table conversation, a reflective piece, and kind of a little package to take home for those that want to go deeper with that. And I have to say that the uptake on that has been really, really incredible. Oh, I see I have some, I didn't realize I had some animation in here. So I'm just going to go back to that. So, you know, these are just a few examples of some of the sessions that we've done. And so it's interesting because I would say like every session, as we're like waiting, you know, it's kind of like 10 to 4 o'clock, and people are trickling in. And I say to our superintendent all the time, you know, is this going to be the time that nobody actually attends these sessions? Because the uptake's been so incredible. We're getting like 40 to 60 people attending our sessions. And like I said, from 4:15 to 5:30, you know, on a Wednesday or Thursday evening. It's quite incredible that we have had so much interest and so much enthusiasm for this. And I'm going to provide you with some stats here in a little bit about some of the measures that we're currently using to give us some guideposts that work is making a difference. And I think it is, both in terms of, you know, the formal leadership piece, people moving into those positions that come with the title. But I think probably even more exciting than that is we are creating a culture of leadership. And, you know, to bring that back to the study and some of the themes that came out of that, and that division culture is such an important piece. And when we invest in creating a culture of leadership where we operate from the place that you can lead from where you're at, so you don't have to wait till you have the formal title to start leading. You can be a great teacher leader. You can be a great caretaking manager leader. You can be a great counselor leader in our school division. And so we want to create those conditions where people have opportunities to rub shoulders and interact with other people who are interested and want to talk about leadership. We want to create a toolkit and some skills and some ways of thinking so that people can think like leaders and can really operate from that perspective. And we feel that it's really having a profound effect on our culture in the school division. So a couple of discussion questions, and I'll maybe defer to Edgar here in terms of the size of our group. Would we like to go into some breakouts, or would we like to sort of handle the questions in the bigger group?
Thanks very much, Corinne. I think we'll start off with breakout sessions and
Sure.
invite everyone to participate and listen to and share information. So I think we'll try that out and see how the groups are and how that goes. So we have 2 questions. We're going to have 5 minutes for each for the group. How are your mentorship programs linked to division culture? And how are you investing in people to lead from where they're at? And I see some people might have to leave this meeting. So what we'll do is we'll start off in two teams, and if the teams are very small, we'll just join into one larger group. And 5 minutes, and the last person in will be the spokesperson for the group, sharing information back to all of us when we get back together. So let's start now. Thanks very much for the discussion. For group 1, who's the spokesperson, and would like to just share a little bit about what you talked about.
I'm not sure. We decided on a spokesperson. We were talking right down to the ringer there, but
Yeah.
Kim or Jimmy Lou, do you want to share anything?
Perfect. Yeah, no, just a good opportunity for us to discuss that if we lack intentional leadership capacity development, we generally reap what we sow, I guess. And so Kim and I both work in more rural environments and seeing a diminishing number of applicants and seeing some creep with regards to our current school-based leaders, and therefore, you know, the time was yesterday to become more intentional about developing leadership capacity. And so just a little bit of discussion about where we're currently at, and maybe some of the things that we're doing, like our new admin cohorts, but some things that we need to spend more time doing, which is that aspiring leader intentional work.
Thanks, Jimmy Lou. And what, remind us again, what which school authority are you with?
I'm with Northern Lights Public Schools in northeastern Alberta, and Kim is with Aspen View.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, between Brett and Darren, I guess you're unmuted, so you're going to share.
Oh, okay. So you didn't.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were. Anyway.
That's
I thought
okay.
You're unmuted there.
So we talked about our mentorship programs. We do have a formal. I'm in Peace Wapeley School Division, just on the outskirts of Grand Prairie. We're a urban school division, so we have schools that are in the city of Grand Prairie, but we also have smaller schools in some of our smaller outlying communities. We do grow a lot of our own internal leaders in our district, but we do take in people from time to time moving to like to the center of Grand Prairie, where they're coming to a bigger center. We do have a formal leadership development program that we run every 2 years. And it is a 1-year program, not a 2-year program, but we run it every second year. With regards to investing in people for leading from where they're at, we're actually just working on our administrator professional development learning plan for next year. It's quite comprehensive, everything from mentorship for new principals to embedded learning in our administrator meetings, which I'm sure all of you do. Like what Edgar said earlier in the results, I don't think we're doing anything that's out of the ordinary, but we're all trying to make sure, I think, that we're covering, giving our people as much opportunity to be instructional leaders as possible. I think that's one of our big focuses, is to make sure that it's focused on learning. People can learn how to do a budget, or they can learn how to manage their facility, but I think instructional leadership is the key, and that's probably one of the most difficult, spectrums of a school-based leader to learn. I could be a PE social specialist, or I could have been an elementary teacher, and now I'm in a junior senior high as an administrator. So how do I develop that capacity and skill set to actually be an effective leader, to maybe lead out of an area that's not my primary comfort zone? And we have a number of people going into leadership positions that really, quite frankly, aren't ready, but we don't have a choice. So it's our job to actually support them to get them ready. So we're working right now, like I said, on a really comprehensive admin professional learning plan for next year, to try to not just give them the skills they need, but to build that culture of learning as a leader, so that they're not stuck in the minutia of the day-to-day operations, but actually kind of that visionary leadership, that instructional leadership piece that's so critical for moving a school and division forward. And I think an alignment of the division, so that it's not one school doing something great over here. It's that we're all moving forward to do great things together as a school division, as opposed to one school.
Right. Thanks so much, Darren. Really, really appreciate it. I think there's so many more discussions I think that could come out of this, but I'm going to hand it over back to Corinne to continue her presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Edgar. And thanks everyone for engaging in those conversations. So I also want to share a little bit about our RDPSD Leads program, which is often what's referred to as aspiring leaders in lots of places. So this is focused specifically on teacher leaders. It's a 2-year cycle. So we have a group for 2 years. We just wrapped up our first 2-year cycle with the Leads program. And we just wrapped up interviews yesterday for the next 2-year cohort of teacher leaders. And so as many of you are doing, real focus on the LQS and really unpacking that, focus on building that informal and formal leadership, reflection and personal and professional leadership. We provided opportunities in year 2 for the participants in this cohort to go and shadow administrators in other buildings for a couple of half days throughout the year. And that's probably been one of the most successful parts of our cohort is, broadening horizons and broadening perspectives. So having like high school participants go and shadow an elementary administrator, it's mind-blowing, and vice versa, right? And so giving those opportunities to really see how a school ticks and how a leader operates in action and how that might look different from where you're at. When we hire administrators in Red Deer Public, we use a kind of a pooling type of approach. And so we're hiring leaders for the division, and understanding that, most of our contracts of employment say that you're a division employee, not a school employee, but we're not hiring for a specific site. So we hire a pool, the amount of principals or vice principals that we're going to need in a given year. And then we do the assignments, and we use a transfer process that we have to, sort of put the right people together on teams and in schools. So I think that in doing that and having people go out and shadow, it's one of those steps we can take to kind of broadening that perspective, that if you are interested in a formal leadership position here, you may be working for 5 years in a middle school, and then you may move to an elementary or a high school. And so just kind of understanding it from that perspective is really, really a big part of what we're trying to do. We really rely on lots of our internal people for this program as well. We bring in lots of administrators to come and take part, be on panels. Our senior admin has all been involved, and we also work with other Zone 4 school divisions. Lots of us have these programs and have had for many, many years. And so we get the participants together 1 or 2 times a year in each of the 2 years of the program to do some learning together. And again, broaden that perspective and connect with people from other divisions and see what it's like in somewhere that's a little bit different than where you're at. I would say that, the other thing that I'll just make mention of here in terms of how we're trying to skill people and create opportunities for them to be successful is throughout that 2 years, they're building a leadership portfolio. So built into each of our sessions are opportunities for reflection, some prompts for evidence pieces from their practice that they can pull in and connect to the LQS. And then I think one of the most important things that we do with that portfolio is at the end of year 1, and then again at the end of year 2, we have some evidence sharing or an evidence review. And so they can learn from the fellow participants in terms of the kinds of evidence that they're bringing in and bringing forward and talking about. We have administrators that we bring in, and they provide feedback and, for growth and celebration around that evidence. And so there's a great reflective celebration piece that comes with that. But I think another really cool part of doing that as part of this cohort is because our selection process has moved so far over to an evidence-based interview and really a focus on being able to provide those examples and evidence in an interview, the more opportunities that we can give to these pre-service leaders to not only consider what their evidence is of their practice, but to be able to articulate their evidence and tell the story of that, because that is how you win the interview. Is you have to be like, everyone who comes to the interview has the evidence, but can you talk about it? Can you help other people, trustees on a hiring committee and things? Can you articulate that and have other people understand what you've done as an indication of what you will do in a formal leadership role? So that's been a real successful piece. And I think another investment in terms of teaching people how to get where they need to go and have the skills that they need to be successful with that. So how do we know that this is making a difference? A few pieces of evidence here, none of which is super scientific, but I think they're good markers for us. Like I mentioned with our Aspiring Leaders program, we were kind of getting like 40 to 60 people coming out for each of those sessions. We have, regularly 20 or so current administrators, 5 non-certified leaders, all of our senior admin assisting with sessions as table facilitators, panel presenters, breakout sessions. And so I think when we have that kind of interest in helping to make this happen in our division, I think that's a really good expression of that leadership culture that we're creating. Not only do people want to attend these sessions, but they want to be part of the formation of people in our school division. And so that to us is a good marker. Out of the 11 newly hired administrators that we just hired for next year, 9 of those folks regularly attend our Aspiring Leaders sessions. We do a really quick feedback at the end of every one of those sessions, just to kind of gauge, did this meet the mark? Did this make a difference for you? Was it meaningful? And so this is just a sample of what we, typically get. Not everybody always completes it before they leave, but, we're usually getting half to a third of people that are taking the time to give us that feedback. And over again, people are indicating that they can apply the content and that it's been meaningful for them. So those are good pieces of evidence for us. With our LEADS program, I think, some evidence that we're using here. We just, like I said, finished our round of selection process for our next 2-year cohort. We had 30 internal applicants for 12 spots. And people just really took it so seriously when they came in for their 15-minute interview. It was so meaningful for them. And it's just really something that people want to take part in and participate in. 6 of our 11 participants in the last group became vice principals in the last 2 years. And we've had about 16 out of our 21 current principals, all of our senior admin, again, support this program, come in and help us, and really want to invest in our people and be part of what we're trying to accomplish and part of that formation. So those are important stats for us to know that this is making a difference. And lastly, I'll share, obviously there's a lot of unpacking to do at this high level view of our assurance data. But what I can tell you is that we're really, really proud of these preliminary results in our division. We have had, a trend over the last few years away from the fall colors and way more of the blue and green happening. And so this is just a snapshot of that. And I can't help but believe that creating this culture where we're investing in our people and we're creating people who are better leaders, in whatever they're doing for us in the division, that is having an impact on our results. And it is having an impact on making sure that we attract and retain the right people to make great opportunities for kids in the division. So that's exciting for us as well. I'm going to go to another discussion question here. So, just kind of to tap onto what we already talked about the first time, just maybe thinking about how are your mentorship programs filling those toolkits? So are you building skills as well as knowledge? And I appreciate what Darren talked about in terms of, we can teach people some of those skills, but there's also some of those leadership attitudes and behaviors that are important. And I think that, when I think about some of the data that was in this study and maybe, interesting that for some people, they felt that these kinds of things were what made a difference and others feeling that maybe they weren't. And I can't help but wonder if, sometimes it's the intentionality and the quality of what you're doing in terms of these formation programs. And so, maybe the drive-by stuff that's maybe less interactive or less opportunities for people to reflect and apply it to their own practice, is it less effective? And is that maybe, causing some divisions to feel that it isn't an effective way to retain or recruit school leaders. So we'll maybe head back into the groups and have a few minutes to chat about this one.
And the focus will be on filling toolkits. So yes, let's break into our breakouts, and then we'll come back in 5 minutes. Yeah, a lot of people will be interested in the video, following up with the video and the learning guide afterwards as well. So all of the discussion that we will be having in our whole group will be valuable. So just to talk a little bit about you know, the toolkits and that sense of investment and skill development. Maybe if I could just get Brett to talk a little bit about, you know, what he was saying, and then we'll invite whoever the other spokesperson is to just share a little bit, just for a couple of minutes, please.
Okay, thank you, Edgar. When I started speaking from my perspective, you know, a lot of our teachers, they go into teaching for the purpose of being in front of kids, you know, being involved in the school, leading that way. So they've got the pedagogy, they've got that knowledge of the classroom, the leadership curriculum, those sorts of things. Those tools are there in spades for the most part. What we're finding when we do our mentorship, the feedback always comes back that the relationship with their mentor-mentee is powerful. A lot of times we're very intentional in our placements, and we find that, you know, almost putting opposites, whether it's K-4 with a high school, or, you know, a humanities person with a math science, just to give them that perspective. And that ends up being arguably one of the most valuable walkaways that they always talk about. And then when it comes to the tools, though, in the toolbox, it's not the teaching side of things as much as is the managerial side of things. So budget, that evaluation, supervision piece. Many of them really enjoy the supervision. They like to get into the classrooms. They like to help with that side. If it comes to the more fierce conversations that might have to follow, or those sort of tasks, that's where we need to spend a lot of time in providing that opportunity to be successful. To provide a whole bunch of different language, of scenarios, of guiding that way. And I think those are the two biggest for us when it comes to our mentorship program, is the relationship with the mentor-mentee and that lifelong partnership that develops from it, as well as just the toolbox of items that are more managerial to the role.
Right. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks very much, Brett. And from Kim, are you speaking for your group?
Sure. I thought Jimmy Lou jumped in last time, that I thought I would just take it for the group this time.
Great,
So
thanks.
yeah, so when we were talking a lot about the toolkit, when it comes to the mentorship piece, there's lots of the pieces that seem to be maybe a little bit more easier in terms of assisting in the mentorship part, in terms of helping them understand the budget process and understanding where to find all of the APs and the policies, and helping them guide them through things like instructional leadership. But then there is a part that we also talked a little wee bit in terms of understanding their own leadership style, and understanding, you know, does their leadership style actually complement what the school division wants to be, like the face of the division, right? So looking at that cultural component as well, and setting the tone for the rest of the division. So as one of the things that Corinne even talked about, in terms of when, you know, maybe are they being really kind and open and honest when they're working with their teachers and students, but are they also doing exactly the same thing when a parent comes in, or when a custodial staff member comes in? Are they having that same type of relationship with all members of their community aspects? So anyway, just talking about, there's parts that can be easily, maybe not easily taught, but more easily directed and supported. But then there are some pieces that may have a little bit more parts that they need to kind of do a lot more reflection on as leaders themselves.
Great. Thanks very much, Kim. Really appreciate the thoughts coming forward. And Corinne, I'll just hand it over to you, and we'll continue on. Great comments and challenges for all of us. So thanks very much, Corinne.
So I'm just going to touch really quickly here. We also do run our mentorship for our new VPs and our new principals, as I know that many of you do. And so, you know, I guess grounded in the discussion that we just had, trying to look at that balance of skills, the transactional parts of the job that we need to help people with, because we truly have people who don't know how to do some of those things. And so we need to teach them, and we need to give them what they need in their toolkits around that. But also, as Kim mentioned, you know, that who are you as a leader personally, but who are you as a leader in our division? And what are our expectations for leaders here? And how can we help you maintain an attitude and approach to leadership that is good for everybody when we all sort of operate from that place of why we're here and what's important? So we bring our new VPs and new principals in 3 or 4 times in the year. We make sure that they all get teacher growth supervision evaluation in the fall of their first year, so that we can create that skill set for doing evaluations. I'd say that's one of the biggest things that we probably all hear with our new VPs is, holy crow, now I'm out there and I'm doing this, and I never even knew this was the process, really. So making sure that our skill sets there, and budget boot camp, we do that early in the year as well for both new principals, and also for our new VPs, because often we hear when they're making that jump from VP to principal, that's a big area that a lot of them just haven't had a lot of experience with. And then all of a sudden we hand them a budget and, you know, say, now you're in charge of a couple $1 million, so go figure it out. So, you know, just trying to hit those things. And we often will kind of put out a little bit of a survey like around this time of the year in anticipation for next year to our new people, and just say, you know, what are some topics that are on your radar that it's really important that we cover off? Because, you know, we can anticipate, but at the same time, there may be pieces that that we haven't thought of. So that's been helpful for us as well. So I've got another kind of question just to stretch our thinking here a little bit, you know, in terms of all of this. If your principals all won a group lottery and left en masse at the end of the school year, hopefully you were with the group lottery ticket there, but would you have the internal capacity to replace them? Do you feel that you could fill those positions with the people in your division? Or, you know, is that another one of those markers of what can we do to be prepared for something, you know, obviously unlikely that everyone's walking off at the same time, but you know, we all have years where you have a much higher level or volume of retirements and things like that. So any thoughts on that?
Great. Yeah, then we'll stay in the whole group. Any thoughts about internal capacity and that sort of thing, as Corinne said? So go ahead. I think Brett was, you're unmuted, and then Kim.
Well, from our perspective, right now, over half of our administration leadership has been new over the last 2 years. So it almost feels like they had the group lottery tickets, although none of them would say they've received the cash yet, but they have left. So
Checks in the mail, hey?
exactly. But that's really where it created an issue for us. We had the mentorship mentee program, and where we thought we were headed with it from the past, but now all of a sudden, some of our mentors were also being mentored at the same time in their new role, and we found it was really stretching people. You know, new to the role, we already know that the learning curve and the amount of time and energy. And I think whether you like it or not, still coming out of COVID, we still hear that terminology of just from that point of time to the changes and everything with new roles and changing. If we had that happen again right now, I don't believe we have the internal capacity to flow into it smoothly. Do I think we have potential? Absolutely, but we're not there yet in development.
Yeah. Right. Thanks, Brett. How about you, Kim?
I was going to say we definitely have potential, but would we be ready? No, I would definitely be holding everybody to the 30 days.
Yeah. Any other comments, please?
we're going to see the change that Brett was talking about in the next 2 to 3 years. We've had, just kind of slow and steady, but within the next 3 years, we're going to see a mass exodus. And I talked with Corinne and Kim probably 15 years ago, and prior to that, we had a superintendent that really focused on building capacity, and we were able to withstand a lot of changes because there had been a really strong focus on that, and a lot of young administrators brought in at that time. But now we're seeing the end of their time, and so in the next 2 to 3 years, we'll see a significant change. And that's why the best time to plant a tree was however many years ago, and so we didn't plant it soon enough, but we've got to refocus a little bit of our energy and intentionality behind some capacity building to withstand the next 3 years. And again, as is pretty typical, we saw Corinne stats on internal applicants, and I would say we're even higher than that in a rural area. Is that it's rare for us to recruit from the outside, and so we really need to focus our energy and effort on building within.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jimmy Lou. That's very true. Seems to be that came through quite strongly through the survey as well. That notion of building your own capacity is vitally important, especially for some of the smaller rural jurisdictions where they're not getting the candidates that external candidates that others might. Okay. I think let's just continue on then. Go ahead.
Bet. Yeah, I'm watching the time here too, and I know that we want to make sure that we wrap up on time. So I just got a couple of quick other pieces that I just want to touch on, and then I know Edgar's got a few closing remarks to make here as well before 2:30. I kind of, as part and parcel of all of this is also that shift that we've made to that evidence-based hiring. So, really emphasizing the philosophy that your past performance is a great indication of your current or your future performance. And what we're really finding is that the people that are the most successful in our leadership interview selection process are those who can best articulate that they're already doing leadership work. They're not waiting to get the title in order to get started with that. And they're also really able to articulate and tell the story of that evidence. And so that has, I think, really shifted the lens that we're looking through in terms of that part of our leadership recruitment and retention. And if I think about that, as it trickles down to the things that I've spoken to, our cohorts for our new leaders with formal positions, our aspiring RDPSD teacher leaders who are wanting to get to that step, and our aspiring leaders, people that are interested in leadership, maybe interested in going into leads or taking the next step in their employee group and want to be great leaders in their schools. And so if we, trickle that down to that importance of that evidence at the hiring place, well, what are we doing to create those conditions where people can reflect and think about what they're doing and create that body of evidence and that leadership story and that leadership path that prepares them to be ready to take those next steps, not just to win the interview. That's the easy part. The hard part is actually then doing the job. When you're preparing for the interview, we all, have reflected that seems like it's the hard part, but the hard work comes after you land the job. And I would just touch really quickly on our supervision and evaluation and just, really, I think, trying to articulate that in a much more intentional way in terms of what our role is as a senior team in the supervision and evaluation of our principals. We have I think, certainly a little bit tighter turnaround to get to that continuing designation in our division, even though we could take 5 years to get there. Per the collective agreement, we do a 1-year term contract for both new VPs and principals with an evaluation at the end of that year, then a 2-year term contract evaluation at the end of the 3rd year, and then an offer of a continuous designation for year 4, provided the 2 evaluations were successful. And so, there's lots of pieces that are part of those processes, but I think we've really beefed up our supervision as a way to also invest in these people that we have given these positions to and said, okay, we think you're ready. We want you to run our schools. We want you to lead staffs and make sure that students and families have great learning environments. How are we going to use these critical first 3 years as a way to guide you, support you, give you the skills, provide opportunities for you to have feedback so that you can continue to grow and be the best leader that you can be? And I feel that all of those pieces together are really, really enhancing the skill set, the confidence, and the proficiency of our school-based leaders. And that's an amazing thing to see the growth and to see, like I said, that confidence in particular. It's very exciting for us as a division. So that kind of gets me to my very last question here, you know, sort of the pie in the sky thinking. So if resources weren't an obstacle, if we didn't have to come up with budgets to cover off sub costs or whatever else we need to do, like what innovative practice would you implement to enhance recruitment, retention, or investment in your school leaders or your school administration? Like if there were no obstacles in front of you, what is your best big thinking idea that you would love to do?
Thanks, Corinne. Just opening the floor then.
Well, I'll start off then. One thing that we would love to do is have somebody, whether you call it a division principal or such, but a position where all they did was work with their administration. There was nothing else put on their plate, I guess, unless of an emergency. But unfortunately, the plate is full, and then we ask, and can you work with our admin, if that makes sense? But it would be not lovely to just have that person. You know, we have 18 schools, we have 42 administration. If they could be solely dedicated to that, I think that would be a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. We just can't afford it.
For sure.
Right.
That just-in-time support where, it's the coaching and those really rich conversations, and also the problem solving, like, holy crow, we've got a crisis, can you help us before it blows up in our faces, kind of thing. Yeah,
Exactly.
that'd be an awesome luxury to have, wouldn't it?
Yeah, when I was a principal and being evaluated, we had a change in leadership from the superintendent standpoint, as well as one of the assistant superintendents. So anyways, we hired a gentleman out of Saskatchewan, retired. He came out to spend time. He spent, I'm going to say, close to 18 hours with me on my evaluation.
Wow.
It was the greatest
Yeah.
experience. And I always said, I wish I could do that for each of our like, I wish I could.
Right.
I'm still wishing, and yet to win the lottery. So,
Thanks. Right. Thanks, Brett. Jimmy Lou?
Yeah, I echo your thoughts, Brett, for sure, about that time for an individual to dedicate. For us too, it would be time to collaborate. Our admin just learn so much from each other and just really want to talk and map things out. And there's less and less time for collaboration. The other thing is that we're finding, and training is expensive, especially when we talk about more of the HR side of things. But an increased need for mediation training. And I don't mean mediation between bargaining groups or anything like that, but just how to mediate conflict and deal with frustrated parents, adults, staff, and also investigation training. Not because we want our school-based leaders to be doing extensive investigations on, topics that there's a lot of topics we wouldn't want them to touch, but just basic investigation training. When somebody says this or does this, how to look into it and start that process and handle it at a school-based level with confidence. And so, yeah, definitely time to collaborate and training, which again is that time plus financial resources just to purchase it. But it's more the time away. When you look at some of the mediation and investigation training, I mean, 2 or 3 days would be almost a minimum. And it's, it's really difficult to pull people out for that amount of time.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy Lou. What you're touching on, and I saw lots of nodding, is what the growing need is as our context changes around us. How do we address that, and means we will need to be doing some things a little differently. Anyone else?
I think if I had no obstacles and resources weren't a problem, I would love to create an internship opportunity for people to like as part of my RDPSD leads program. I would love to give those participants, you know, I don't know, some release time, like a significant amount of release time to go and actually like kind of do the job with another administrator and learn those valuable things that just happen because they're happening on that particular day. So I think I would love to be able to offer something like that. But yeah, financially, that's out of the question. But I just think it would be such a rich opportunity for those pre-service leaders.
Absolutely, for sure. So that learning alongside, along with, would be such a critical, would be such a helpful skill development and learning all along the way. So thank you for that. I'm going to, oh, there we go. Just to wrap up, I know that we could continue with the dialogue, and some great ideas have been shared, and I hope that this spurs you on to do some more dialogue between and among colleagues that are present here, but also others. So we did say that, you know, retention of school leaders is strategic, and it's ongoing work. It's never ending, and it is key for system education leaders to be doing that. That sense of, and I might be overstating it, but that sense of investment does lead to retention, but it does take some of framing around investment. It's not an expense, but rather it's investing in the leadership for the future, now and for the future. The PD supports and division culture account for the most common actions taken by school authorities to help retain school leaders. That's true, and a variety of actions are needed to retain school leaders, and we heard that by the different ways in which school divisions manage their notion of leadership development, leadership PD, skill development, and so on. So we know that it's not one size fits all, but that there needs to be something that brings everyone to, there needs to be a variety in a way that meets the needs of your local context. Okay, so I just wanted, and there were other things too around evidence and change, you know, being able to identify measures early on around the changes that you're implementing and how effective they are. That's a critical piece as well. I want to thank you all for participating. A special thank you to Corinne for her presentation and what she shared, and of course the dialogue that we had with everyone in the breakout rooms and in the large group session. So I want to thank you very much. This is the last of the 3 webinar series. They are all recorded. There will be learning guides and made for each of these that can be returned to, or you can invite perhaps other colleagues that were not able to attend today to take a look and see what was what the discussion was about, what the content was, that sort of thing. The very first session just 2 weeks ago is already posted, and so we hope to have these posted as soon as possible. Today's session and last week's session posted as soon as possible. Thanks again for participating. I hope you have a great afternoon and a great end to the year as it's coming up. So thanks very much, everyone.